All right, so we're talking with Jessica and Amy Andrews and Jessica Griffith about their book Love and Salt. And it's a spiritual journey between the two of you where you share these letters and these connections with each other. At what point, if I could ask, did you decide that you would keep this process going after Lent? When did you know that that's something you wanted to do after sort of using as a Lenten practice?
It wasn't really a decision. It just happened. We just knew we couldn't stop. It became such an essential part of our day, and really the only way that we felt we knew how to pray. I mean, that was the most exciting part about it, was that we had always struggled with prayer, and to finally find this way that we could enter into that state of contemplation, we just couldn't give it up.
Interesting. Now you're both married, is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not
Yep.
to each other, but you are both married. So I was sort of, listening to you talk and hearing, and looking at the book and hearing you describe this. I'm wondering if the other people in your life became a bit jealous or felt disconnected from this relationship, because you're in two different
might
states.
Be the word that you're looking for.
Say it again.
I feel that my husband is always very happy that I have Amy in my life, that there is someone else with whom I can share.
Because it lets him off the hook?
Yes.
Takes the edge off a little.
He's also a Catholic writer. He's very interested in theology. He writes about it himself, but we have different approaches. And I think that he is just very glad I have someone to share that intensity with. Yeah. It's definitely not jealous. It's relieved.
Amy, what about your
situation?
situation?
About Mark, Amy.
I think there actually is some jealousy in just the lightest way. But I think when Jess and I are together, we tend to be very obsessively in conversation with each other. So there have been times when the four of us have gone out, or when my husband or her husband is trying to get our attention and we are hard to reach. So I think there is a little bit of jealousy there. But our husbands luckily really like each other and really like both of us. So it's not a problem. But I think
and this is one of the
jealousy
things
in my marriage, it's been with this.
And this is one of the things, on a larger scale, for people that are in spiritual friendships or friendships that seem to enliven one's spirit, that there does become something unique in that connection. Like, not every relationship in life is the same, and not every relationship generates the same contribution between the people. And it can be intimidating for folks, and I'm sure you maybe even had other friends that would have felt like you're a different person in that relationship than you are with them. So not just like something's being left out, or you're tired at the end of reading that, but that the person that you are in that connection is a different person than you are in the dynamics of these other relationships. Sometimes it's just so profound what I say. It just brings utter silence across the airwaves. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think in
hang on, Amy. I think Jessica. Hang on a second, Amy.
I feel like it's one of.
Hang on, Amy. I think Jessica's. I know it's kind of hard for you guys to hear each other, but go ahead, Jess.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the connection is. I'm having a hard time hearing. Go ahead, Jess.
I was just saying, when my sister read the book, I'm very close to my sister, but she was just sort of like, "You think this stuff? I mean, who is this person?" And it's like she didn't recognize the character in the book that she was encountering, and it's just so true. There are things that I talk about with Amy. There's a way that I am with Amy that I really am not with others, that I can't be with others.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you two decide that you're going to take this intimate, personal relationship and package it and market it as a sellable book? When did the sellout conversation happen that you decided to?
Sellout conversation. Well, it's funny because I was actually living in the same town with Jess for a short period of time. My husband ended up getting jobs at the same university, and then less than a year after that, I moved away. And when I was moving away, Jess and I were very sad about this. In some ways, we were sad. We knew we were going to get our letters back, which was a consolation, but we were sad that the sort of daily life that we had enjoyed together was over. And during the conversations about this, we decided that we were going to bind our letters as a gift for each other, and we read through them at that time. I think we wanted a way of returning to our letters because while we had been living together, we hadn't been able to write them. And we read through them and realized it was sort of a shock to us that there was a very strong narrative there. And we had this moment of revelation, just seeing that it was a story. And we just so happened at that time to be reading a book by Alan Jacobs called Looking Before and After, Testimony in the Christian Life. And it's really a call to Christians to tell their stories. And he's talking, and what he really wants people to do is try to tell their whole stories. And what he means by that is not the moment of conversion that so many people see it as a moment, but their conversion stories, meaning their entire lives, from beginning to wherever they are now. And I think, and what he says it will do in that, and by doing that, is flesh out various forms of the Christian life and provide hope for people on the road to God. And I think we saw that our story fleshed out the way of friendship in a way that is in many ways hard to do, because that sort of intimacy is hard to convey. But through these letters, it seemed like you could get a glimpse at that inner working of a friendship. So we just got excited by that possibility and decided to take these 1,000 pages we had and see what we could do. And so we started editing them.
That's the thing. There are books about spiritual friendship, but it's all theoretical. It's all, how you might recognize spiritual friendship in your life, or what spiritual friendship can offer you. And what we saw, and I think you were kind of hitting on this earlier, Doug, when you're talking about the change in the letters, is that it goes from being a kind of theoretical discussion of faith, although rooted in our lives, and then suddenly we enter that story. The theology becomes real. We have to deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis. We have to struggle with how you believe in God when there is human suffering. And you see this happening in our lives, these very real stories, not just theoretical ponderings about the subject.
So
we thought that was valuable.
So I'm a little interested in the process again. So you had these 1,000 pages of handwritten, mostly handwritten letters back and forth. Then you had to sit down and type them into a computer. Who did that? Did you type your own letters? Did you type the other person's letters? How did you decide to do that?
And how much did you change them?
And how much did you change them?
Well, we first had to photocopy them all. We photocopied all the letters. We made binders of them, of these photocopied letters, and then we began transcribing them. And that took us months. And we did our own. I did mine, Jess did hers. And that took us months and months just to get the transcript, just to get them all written out. And then we had this process of taking them, sending these documents back and forth and collating them.
Oh, boy.
So it was quite a process, and then we had to, of course,
it's messier than friendship, right? It's like a metaphor for friendship.
Incredibly tedious. And at many moments we thought, why are we doing this? This is never going to go anywhere. No one wants to read our personal letter. I mean, so on top of all of the tedium and this was a very long, involved editing process. So also all of the doubts writers have anyway going along with that.
Yes, right.
It was trying, but it was also very fascinating because, as you said, we often wrote these letters by hand and just sent them off and never looked at them again. So to get them returned to us and to see them side by side, to see the conversation happening, we were just blown away by the story that was there. That was the story, we had written our letters, but we felt like we didn't know we were writing this story. This story seemed, something that we lived, but we weren't aware of writing the story at the time. But in the editing process, we did have to consolidate letters. We did have to collapse some events into certain letters. We had 1,000 pages. There was no way we were publishing a 1,000-page book. So we really tried to just be true to the story that was obviously there, but we had to sort of prune away things that weren't as important to that development of that narrative.
So, every writer, as you mentioned, deals with that question of who's going to care about my ideas, right? Why would anybody else think this is interesting? And there's a whole thing that goes on. And it's not just for writers, it's for people, Amy, as you were mentioning, who want to tell their whole story. A lot of people don't because they don't tell their stories because they don't think anybody really cares. And for the most part, of the 7 billion people on the planet, most people probably don't care, right? That's the stark reality. So one has to offer themselves to the world knowing that there might be some people for whom this is meaningful and that they care. Did that seem particularly in focus for the two of you, that you were that you were vulnerable in that way?
I think we both felt vulnerable, definitely, and it was definitely a process of going. Actually, this is interesting. After we finished editing the letters, we shelved the final product for almost 2 years, maybe
Really?
a year and a half to 2 years, and we didn't touch it. We didn't send it anywhere, and it was really. Jess just on a whim said, "You know what? I'm going to send it to Loyola Press," and we did, and then they wanted it, and that was it. So it was very fast. I think we didn't really expect it to be that fast, so we didn't really prepare ourselves for how it was going to feel. But then the whole process of from them deciding they wanted it to publication was about a year, so we had a lot of time to think about it through that year.
Okay, tell us about the title, Love and Salt.
Well, that actually comes out of one of my letters to Jess. It was the letter we were having a very hard time after we encountered this tragedy together, and we were trying to find a way somehow to bring our friendship back. We had continued writing to each other, but in secret, so we had these letters that we didn't know the other one was writing, and we had to have a way of somehow reconnecting and trying to build our friendship up again. And I wrote a letter to Jess. I remember I'd been talking to my husband, who's a philosopher, and I was saying that I just felt like my friendship with Jess was over because the pleasure in our friendship had been taken out. And he brought up Aristotle to comfort me, and he said, well, there's actually
as only a philosopher husband would do.
Yes, I know. So he brought up these 3 ways of friendship. And in doing that and reading Aristotle, we came across this quotation about how people cannot be good friends until they've eaten together much salt. And at the time, I was in a state of grief. I didn't try to research what that meant. I just thought about it and thought all I could think of was that salt meant the salt of tears, and that she and I were sharing together this salt. And I remember thinking that this is what will make, I think the other phrase he uses is dear and trustworthy, that this salt that we were sharing will make us all the more dear and trustworthy to each other. So I signed the letter with Love and Salt, and that becomes sort of the letter of reconciliation.
So do you think guys are going to want to read this book? Like your husbands, what do they tell you? What do other people tell you? Like, is it one of those like gender genre books, right? Where like it's really great for women and to read, and guys are going to be like, I don't know why people talk like this, or am I being too blunt or too?
The person at Loyola Press who liked the book the most was the publisher, the head of Loyola Press, who is a man, and we've definitely gotten a lot of very positive feedback from men. So I don't think it is cut off from men.
Book.
We talk about theology. We talk about so many things that are universal ideas, and friendship is certainly a universal idea. So I don't think it's cut off from men at all.
Jess, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's just so, because it has pink on the cover and love, and it's about women writing letters to each other. I think it looks like a women's book, but it gives me pause, because I feel like, we're talking about theology here. We're talking about philosophy. We're referencing great works of literature, film, and art, all of the best of secular thought, all of the best of religious thought. And I can't see why that wouldn't be interesting to men as well as to women. And I say it that way because I almost feel like I have this temptation to say, well, but it's serious. It's a serious book. But I feel like it's so sexist to have to say that. It's a book by 2 smart women talking about faith. And if you're interested in faith, if you're interested in doubt, I feel like this book will appeal to you.
Well, it's interesting. My question wasn't, I think you guys said that very well, but my concern for men not reading it, I mean, partly is the cover, because it's got I think it's a great looking book cover and all that, but it does certainly have that kind of genre look to it. But I actually think that the subtitle, A Spiritual Friendship Shared in Letters, I think those words are really serious and intense, and that's what I think would make guys think, I'm not reading that book, right? Like for a lot of guys, friendship is not, it's this sort of, the idea of a spiritual friendship in the first place is a really intimidating thing to a lot of people who are influenced by masculine society. And I think the idea that there's a sharing of the internal, deep kind of stuff that goes on in your life is, I think it's intimidating.
It's
so it's
interesting that
more
you're saying
serious. I think it's the seriousness of it that would be off-putting.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it's so interesting that you're saying this, because in the history of writings on friendship, it is the complete reverse. So Jess and I've read a lot now, what the philosophers, what people have said through the ages on friendship, and invariably they dismiss friendship, this kind of friendship, spiritual friendship, as a possibility for women. Like Montaigne says that women's souls are not strong enough to bear the weight of the sacred bond, something like that. And so it's just interesting to hear you say that your perception would be almost the reverse now, because we read all these classic writings on friendship and can recognize ourselves in them, but they are explicitly saying that this isn't a possibility for women.
Yeah. But I'm sure it was all women that read those books back then too, even though they're written by guys. I don't know. Maybe that's not true.
I'm actually working on an essay on this exact subject. So your thoughts on this are making me revise my thesis a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's intimidating, honestly, and I think I'm a part of a church with Victoria, and we're just normal and kind of your ordinary sort of group of people, but we had a men's retreat where men went together to this little cabin and built stuff. And then the women's retreat is going to this Catholic monastery, and they're going to share about stuff. And
classic.
It is classic, right? And I mean, and we're not sort of your we're like urban types of folks,
And we have a lot of cross-gendered relationships in our church community. It's not always the women go away and do stuff and the men go away. We're very usually that's unusual for us to be that way,
right.
but I think about
that you pick up on that, the sharing being a feminine word, and honestly, we also picked up on that when we were titling our book. And we kind of balked at that word being in the subtitle. We really wanted it to just be a spiritual friendship in letters because we felt that was feminizing in some way.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I do think you're onto something there, that this idea that women get together and they share. They get together and they have their tea and they share their stories, and it's so sweet, and that's not what's going on in this book. This book
that's
is
interesting.
not
Yeah, because my
sweetness and
concern
light
isn't that it's overly saccharine or overly sweet. It's that it's true and intense. And that's scary to guys more than the saccharine sweetness of who's got time for that. It's I don't want anybody knowing what's going on the inside. Like, men spend a lot of time and energy internally covering up stuff that goes on internally.
Right.
Yeah.
But we will tell all the male listeners of this radio show, you should give this one a try, even if it intimidates you. If you think it's too saccharine and sweet, I think you can tell by the interview that it's not going to be that. But it's
but it is intimate.
You're really hitting on why my husband is relieved that I have Amy, so that's very enlightening to me.
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot, you guys. We appreciate you being willing to share share your story, share your book, and your willingness to be on the show today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, good luck with it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, so that's Love and Salt, a spiritual friendship shared in letters.
I'm sure it was a pretty big deal to
Amy
decide
Andrews
all
and
these
Jessica
letters
Griffin.
that they had written to one another to make
Yeah,
that
I want the
leap.
outcuts. I want the ones
Yeah.
they didn't.
Well, and the note, I forgot to talk about this, but they shared in the book some of the notes of the period of time where they were trying to write to one another but couldn't.
Okay.
Because they were in such deep grief over this tragedy that had happened. And they put these notes in the book. And so you get to hear what they wanted or were trying to say to each other. And you can kind of understand why they didn't. But it creates a different aspect, the conversation underneath the conversation, if you will, or the conversation before the conversation. And it was a good choice. It was a really good decision to include those notes.
All right, so that's Love and Salt. Take a look, and if you're watching on the video stream, we're going to keep it going live. If you're watching on the video, we're going to roll over to the last segment, Doug Pagitt Radio, February 28th edition, and same thing with Spreaker. You can roll over to the new one. So stick with us here, and we're going to be back in just a second with the rest of Doug Pagitt Radio. Breaking Bad edition. Bow.